The encounter in the cold. Officer Lucas Hayes pulled into the grocery store parking lot, his breath visible in the icy winter air. The early morning sun barely peeked over the horizon, casting long shadows across the frost-covered asphalt. The lot was nearly empty, save for a few cars and a small figure sitting alone on the curb near the store entrance. Lucas squinted through the windshield, his heart skipping a beat. A little girl, no more than 5 years old, clutched a worn teddy bear to her chest. Her pink winter coat was slightly unzipped, revealing a thin sweater beneath, and her matching boots swung back and forth as she sat there, seemingly unbothered by the cold. Instinct and concern kicked in simultaneously. Lucas parked the patrol car and stepped out, his movements slow and deliberate. He didn't want to startle her, though he felt a growing sense of unease. Cases involving children always hit him the hardest. Memories of his younger sister flashed in his mind, but he quickly pushed them aside. "Hi there, sweetheart," he said gently, kneeling a few feet away to meet her eye level. "I'm Officer Lucas. Are you okay?" The girl looked up, her large brown eyes meeting his. Despite the situation, she seemed calm, too calm for someone her age sitting alone in the cold. Her teddy bear had a missing eye, and its fur was matted from years of affection. "I'm Zoe," she said softly, hugging the bear tighter. "That's a lovely name," Lucas replied, offering her a small, reassuring smile. "And who's this?" "This is Mr. Teddy," she answered, holding up the bear slightly. "He keeps me company." Lucas nodded, noting the girl's composure. "That's nice. Do you know where your mommy or daddy is, Zoe? Are they nearby?" Her lower lip trembled slightly, and then she delivered a sentence that shattered Lucas's composure. "Mommy doesn't want me anymore." For a moment, Lucas was at a loss for words. In 10 years on the force, he had dealt with difficult cases, but this one was different. There was a quiet heartbreak in her voice, one that no child should have to bear. "Why do you think that, sweetheart?" he asked carefully. "We were playing hide and seek," she explained, her small voice matter of fact. "But when I found her, she wouldn't wake up to count. She just stayed sleeping on the floor." Lucas's heart sank. Years of experience told him there was more to the story. He reached for his radio, his voice steady but urgent. "Dispatch, this is Officer Hayes. I need backup at the Ridgeview grocery parking lot. Possible child neglect case. Requesting assistance." Turning back to Zoe, he kept his tone gentle. "Would you like to come with me, Zoe? We can get somewhere warm, and I can introduce you to Officer Maria. She's great with kids, and I bet she'd love to meet Mr. Teddy." Zoe hesitated, studying him with an intensity that seemed unusual for her age. "Do you have marshmallows?" she asked. Lucas couldn't help but smile despite the gravity of the situation. "The tiny ones that float in your hot chocolate?" "Absolutely." She nodded, sliding off the curb and taking his hand. "Okay. Mr. Teddy says it's fine." Lucas guided her to the patrol car, securing her in the back seat with a blanket he kept for emergencies. As he drove toward the station, he glanced at her in the rearview mirror. She gazed out the window, holding her teddy bear tightly. At the station, Officer Maria Delgado greeted them with her usual warmth. She knelt to Zoe's level, handing her a steaming cup of hot chocolate, topped with mini marshmallows. "Hello, Zoe. And who's this?" she asked, pointing to the teddy bear. "This is Mr. Teddy," Zoe replied, her voice a little brighter. "Well, it's lovely to meet you both," Maria said, her kind smile unwavering. "Do you want to tell me more about your game of hide and seek with Mommy?" As Zoe recounted her story, Lucas observed from a distance, noting her calm demeanor and the small details she revealed. Her coat, though slightly small, was clean. Her boots were scuffed but well cared for. Her braids were neat, though secured with yesterday's hair ties. These weren't signs of a typical neglect case. But her words haunted him. She just stayed sleeping. Lucas's gut told him this was more than an abandonment case, and as he watched Zoe sip her hot chocolate, her tiny marshmallow mustache adding a layer of innocence to the troubling situation. He made a silent vow. He would uncover the truth and protect this little girl from whatever dangers lurked in her story. Secrets in plain sight. The warm, inviting aroma of hot chocolate lingered in the station's common room as Zoe sat at a small table, diligently coloring with crayons Officer Maria had given her. Mr. Teddy sat beside her, a silent guardian, as though the worn bear itself understood the weight of her situation. Officer Lucas Hayes leaned against the wall, his arms crossed and his expression unreadable. He was watching her, not in judgment, but in search of answers hidden within her every innocent action. "She doesn't fit the usual profile," Maria said softly as she approached Lucas, holding a clipboard with Zoe's preliminary file. Clean clothes, well-kept hair. This wasn't a child left to fend for herself. There's love and care here. But something's wrong, very wrong. Lucas nodded, his gaze never leaving Zoe. She said her mother didn't wake up. That could mean anything: exhaustion, substance abuse, or worse. But the way she said it, his voice trailed off, heavy with the implications. Maria set the clipboard down, pulling a chair closer to Lucas. "We can't ignore her calmness either. She's too composed for a child who believes her mother has abandoned her. That kind of composure comes from seeing more than a kid her age should." Lucas sighed and ran a hand through his short, cropped hair. "I've called child services. They'll come by to evaluate her, but we both know they'll recommend emergency foster placement unless we can find her mother." "Did she say anything else?" Maria asked, her tone both curious and concerned. Lucas glanced toward Zoe again. She had begun humming softly to herself as she carefully colored the sun in her drawing. "She said they moved recently, but nothing specific about where. And she mentioned playing hide and seek before. Whatever happened to her mom? I'll dig through missing persons reports and see if anything lines up." Maria leaned closer. "Lucas, she trusts you. If there's more to her story, you're the one she'll open up to." Before he could respond, Zoe looked up, clutching her teddy bear. "Mr. Teddy doesn't like being alone," she said, her small voice cutting through the adult's quiet conversation. She held the bear up toward Lucas. "Can you hold him?" Lucas walked over, crouching to her level. "Of course I can, Zoe. Mr. Teddy's safe with me." As he took the bear, his trained fingers noticed something unusual, a hard bulge beneath the worn fabric. His eyes met Maria's, and they both immediately understood the significance. Careful not to alarm Zoe, Lucas examined the seam along the bear's back. A small opening revealed itself, and within seconds, he pulled out a tightly folded piece of paper. "What's that?" Zoe asked innocently, tilting her head. "Just something Mr. Teddy was holding on to," Lucas replied with a reassuring smile. "Can I read it?" Zoe nodded, contentedly returning to her drawing. Lucas unfolded the paper, his heart pounding. Written in hurried, shaky handwriting were the words, "I'm sorry, Zoe. Be brave for me." Maria's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God, Lucas. That's not just a note. That's a goodbye." Hours later, Lucas sat at his desk, the note now part of an emerging puzzle. Sergeant Raymond Blake approached, his experienced face etched with concern. "Anything new?" Blake asked, leaning on the edge of Lucas's desk. Lucas handed him the note. "Found this hidden in her teddy bear. Her mother left it there. But why? Was it planned, or is she in trouble?" Blake read the note, his brow furrowing. "A message like this doesn't scream abandonment. It screams desperation. We need to track her down. Fast." Lucas nodded. "I'm pulling her mother's name from our database now. Zoe said she's Monty, but no last name yet. I'll start with missing persons and recent relocation records." "Good." Blake tapped the desk. "And Lucas, be careful. If someone's after that little girl, you're sitting on a ticking time bomb." Lucas's fingers flew across the keyboard, sifting through databases and public records. The clock ticked loudly in the quiet room, each passing second intensifying his urgency. Zoe's mother had to be out there, alive or otherwise. And if she wasn't, The thought made his jaw tighten. An address finally popped up. A rental agreement signed by Kara Thompson just 2 months earlier. The address was for a modest apartment complex on the city's outskirts. Lucas grabbed his coat and motioned for Maria to follow. "Stay with Zoe," Lucas instructed a junior officer as he and Maria headed for the door. "We'll be back soon." The apartment complex was eerily silent when they arrived. Lucas noted the peeling paint on the walls and the dim flickering light in the stairwell. The place wasn't a slum, but it bore the marks of financial struggle. He and Maria climbed to the 3rd floor, their footsteps echoing in the corridor. Apartment 3B's door was slightly ajar. Lucas signaled Maria to draw her weapon as he did the same. "Police," he called out, his voice firm and steady. "Is anyone inside?" No response. Pushing the door open with his foot, Lucas entered first. The apartment was small but tidy. Crayon drawings adorned the fridge, and a mismatched couch sat in the center of the living room. The air was stale, as if the windows hadn't been opened in days. Then Lucas saw it, a crumpled blanket on the floor next to an overturned chair. His heart raced as he approached, his mind flashing through the possibilities. On the coffee table lay an envelope with the words "To Zoe" written in the same handwriting as the note from the teddy bear. Maria covered him as Lucas carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a key, old, brass, and worn, and a folded piece of paper. This note was longer, and as Lucas read, his blood turned cold. "If you found this, I'm gone. Protect her. They'll come for her." "What the hell is going on here?" Maria whispered, her voice shaking slightly. Lucas pocketed the key, his instincts screaming that they'd stumbled into something far more dangerous than they'd anticipated. "We need to secure this place," Lucas said, his voice steady despite the storm brewing inside him. "And we need to find Kara. Now." Shadows from the past. Lucas sat at his desk, staring at the brass key lying in front of him. It was old and worn, its notches sharp and irregular, suggesting it wasn't a typical house or car key. He turned it over in his hands, his mind racing with possibilities. This key wasn't just a leftover from Kara's life. It was a breadcrumb, a clue leading to a larger mystery. But to what? Maria entered the room, carrying 2 cups of coffee. She set one down in front of Lucas, her expression grim. The forensics team finished at Kara's apartment. No signs of foul play, but they did find evidence she left in a hurry. Half-packed suitcases, unfinished meals on the counter. Lucas nodded, his eyes still fixed on the key. She wasn't planning to leave her daughter behind. Whatever happened, it forced her hand. Maria took a seat beside him, sipping her coffee. "What about the key? Any ideas?" Lucas shook his head. "It's not for a car or a house. It's old, probably for something like a storage unit or a safety deposit box." He paused, his mind clicking through scenarios. If she left this for Zoe, it's important. Whatever's hidden away, she wanted it to stay safe. "Storage units," Maria said, leaning forward. "That makes sense. People use them for valuables, especially when they're in trouble." Lucas nodded. "Let's start there. I'll pull a list of facilities near her apartment and check them out." As he began searching, Maria glanced toward the break room, where Zoe was quietly playing with her crayons. The little girl seemed oblivious to the storm brewing around her, her innocent humming a stark contrast to the gravity of their investigation. "What about Zoe?" Maria asked softly. "If we're right, and Kara's in trouble, she could be in danger too." Lucas's jaw tightened. "That's why we need answers. Fast." The first storage facility on their list was a dead end, modern, with electronic locks and keep-it access. The second was the same. But at the third, Lucas's gut told him they were onto something. Riverside Storage was an older facility, its rows of metal units lined up like soldiers in a forgotten battleground. The office smelled of coffee and stale cigarettes, and the clerk, an older man with a thick mustache, barely glanced up from his crossword puzzle as Lucas approached the counter. "Morning," Lucas said, flashing his badge. "I'm Officer Hayes. We're looking into a case and need to check if this key matches any of your units." The clerk squinted at the key Lucas held up, then nodded slowly. "Yeah, that's one of ours. Old style. We don't use those locks anymore, but some of the older units still have them." "Can you tell us which unit it belongs to?" Lucas asked. The clerk hesitated, glancing at Maria, who stood silently behind Lucas. "I'd need a warrant to give you access." "We're not asking for access, just confirmation," Maria said smoothly. "It's part of an ongoing investigation involving a missing person." The clerk seemed to mull this over before pulling out a dusty logbook. He flipped through the pages, his finger trailing down a list of numbers. "East Section," he finally said. "Unit E107. "Thanks," Lucas said, slipping the key back into his pocket. As they made their way to the East Section, Maria glanced at him. "You think this is it?" Lucas nodded. "If it's not, we're running out of breadcrumbs." Unit E107 was nondescript, its metal door identical to the others around it. Lucas inserted the key into the lock, his hand steady despite the anticipation building in his chest. The lock clicked open, and the door rolled up with a groan, revealing a small, neatly arranged space. The first thing Lucas noticed was the photographs. They were stacked neatly in a shoebox, each one capturing a moment in Kara and Zoe's life. A birthday party, a day at the park, quiet evenings at home. Lucas's throat tightened as he flipped through them. Despite the smiles in the pictures, he could see the exhaustion in Kara's eyes, the weight of whatever she had been carrying. Next to the box of photos was a leather-bound journal. Lucas opened it carefully, his eyes scanning the first page. The handwriting was neat but rushed, the words a raw glimpse into Kara's mind. "I'm so tired. Every day feels like a battle I can't win. But I have to keep going, for Zoe. She's my light, my everything." Maria, standing behind him, read over his shoulder. She was trying to hold it together, for her daughter. Lucas nodded, flipping to another page. This entry was dated just days before Zoe was found. "They're watching. I can feel it. I don't know how they found us, but I need to act fast. Zoe needs to be safe. If anything happens to me, she has to be okay." "Who's they?" Maria asked, her voice low. Lucas didn't answer. Instead, he reached for the last item in the unit, a small metal box. It was locked, but the brass key fit perfectly. Inside, he found what he hadn't expected: an envelope stuffed with cash, a few pieces of jewelry, and a folded piece of paper. The paper was a drawing, a simple crayon sketch of a woman and a little girl holding hands, with a smiling sun in the corner. Zoe's name was scrawled in bright colors across the top. Lucas stared at the drawing for a long moment, his chest tightening. This wasn't just a clue, it was a lifeline, a plea from a mother desperate to protect her child. "We need to run this cash through the system," Maria said, breaking the silence. "If it's connected to whoever's watching her, it might lead us to them." Lucas nodded, carefully placing everything back into the box. "And we need to find Kara. If she's running from someone, we're already behind." As they closed the unit and headed back to the station, Lucas couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into something much bigger than a missing person case. The shadows Kara had been running from were closing in, and Lucas was determined to shine a light on them, no matter what it took. Pieces of the puzzle. Back at the station, Lucas sat at his desk, the contents of the storage unit spread out before him: photos, journal entries, cash, and the crayon drawing. All items that painted a vivid picture of Kara Thompson's love for her daughter and the danger she was fleeing. But none of it explained who she was running from or why. Maria entered the room, her expression grim. "I ran the serial numbers on the cash. Most of it is clean, but a couple of the bills flagged from a fraud investigation 2 years ago. They're connected to a case involving a Michael Evans. Name ring a bell." Lucas's head snapped up. "Michael Evans." Maria nodded. "He's Kara's brother." Lucas leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. "That's it. In her journal, she mentioned someone watching her. Someone close. If it's her brother, it makes sense why she'd leave Zoe behind. She didn't want him finding her daughter. Maria crossed her arms. But why would her own brother be after her? What's his angle? Lucas glanced at the photos, particularly one where Kara held Zoe tightly, a strained smile on her face. Money, control, something darker. Who knows? People like Evans don't need good reasons to destroy lives. They just need an opportunity. He pulled up Michael Evans's name in the police database, his fingers flying across the keyboard. A file popped up, complete with a photo of a sharp-featured man in an expensive suit. The record was peppered with complaints. Fraud, coercion, financial manipulation, but no convictions. Evans was slippery, a predator who knew how to stay just within the law. "Look at this," Lucas said, tilting the screen toward Maria. "He's been tied to multiple cases where vulnerable people lost everything. Family members, business partners, even a charity he supposedly managed. But no charges ever stuck." Maria scowled. "And now he's after Kara. What for? Custody of Zoe. That doesn't make sense." Lucas opened the journal again, flipping to the last few entries. He read aloud. "I asked him for help once. Never again. He thinks he owns me, that I owe him for every mistake I've made. But I won't let him have Zoe. Never. She's terrified of him," Lucas said, his voice hardening. "And it's not just about her. She knows he'll use Zoe as leverage." Maria sat down across from him, her face thoughtful. "If we're going to protect Kara and Zoe, we need more than suspicions. We need proof. Something that ties Evans directly to the threats she's running from." Lucas tapped the metal box from the storage unit. "There's more here. She wouldn't leave cash like this unless it had a purpose. What if this was her emergency escape fund, and he knew about it? If he found out she took the money, that could explain his pursuit." Maria nodded. "Or maybe he thinks she knows something. Something he's desperate to keep hidden." "Then we're going to find out what it is," Lucas said, standing. "Let's dig deeper into his financials, see if we can find a connection to the flagged bills. If Evans is our shadow, we need to bring him into the light." Hours passed as Lucas and Maria worked tirelessly, piecing together the puzzle. They cross-referenced Evans's accounts, transactions, and previous complaints, tracing every lead they could find. Each discovery painted a clearer picture of a man who thrived on control and intimidation. But the breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Officer Hayes, a junior officer, called from across the room, waving a printout. "You need to see this." Lucas walked over, taking the paper. It was a financial report showing a series of transfers from one of Evans's accounts to a shell company, one that had recently been flagged for money laundering. The dates matched the time Kara had taken Zoe and disappeared. "This is it," Lucas said, his voice charged with energy. "Evans isn't just chasing Kara out of spite. He's using her. She must have stumbled onto something, laundered money, hidden accounts, and now he's trying to silence her." Maria leaned over his shoulder, scanning the document. "And if we can prove it, we can shut him down." "Not just him," Lucas said. "We can use this to show the court exactly who he is and why he shouldn't be anywhere near Zoe." The following morning, Lucas and Maria visited the district attorney's office, presenting their findings. The DA, a sharp-eyed woman named Evelyn Carter, listened intently as they laid out the case. "This is solid," Carter said, flipping through the documents. "But it's not enough to nail Evans. We'll need Kara to testify. Her first-hand account of his threats, his attempts to manipulate her." Lucas's stomach tightened. "That's the problem. We don't know where she is, and until we find her, Zoe's still at risk." Carter set the file down, her expression serious. "Then you'd better find her. Fast." Back at the station, Lucas sat with Zoe in the break room, watching as she carefully added the finishing touches to a drawing. It was another crayon masterpiece, this time of her, Kara, and Mr. Teddy, all smiling under a bright yellow sun. Lucas, she said suddenly, looking up at him. Do you think Mommy's okay? Lucas's chest tightened. He crouched beside her, meeting her earnest gaze. I think your mom loves you more than anything, Zoe. And I think she's trying her best to keep you safe. Zoe nodded, hugging her teddy bear tightly. Mr. Teddy says Mommy's brave. Lucas smiled, though the weight of their situation loomed over him. She is, Zoe. And so are you. As Zoe returned to her drawing, Lucas stood and joined Maria in the adjoining office. She had pulled up Kara's last known phone records, tracing her movements before she vanished. There, Maria said, pointing to a location ping. Her phone last connected to a tower near Riverside Park. If she's still in the city, she could be hiding somewhere nearby. Lucas grabbed his jacket. Let's go. The search at Riverside Park turned up little. A few leads, but no solid trail. As the sun set, Lucas's frustration grew. Every dead end felt like another failure. Another moment Kara and Zoe remained in danger. But just as they were about to leave, Lucas's phone buzzed. It was a call from an anonymous number. He answered cautiously. This is Officer Hayes. A woman's voice came through, shaky and soft. You're looking for me. Lucas's heart raced. Kara. There was a pause, and then, I don't know who else to trust. But if you're serious about helping me, I need you to come alone. Where are you? Lucas asked, motioning to Maria to stay silent. Pier 17. Midnight. And Officer Hayes. Bring Zoe. The line went dead. Lucas looked at Maria, his mind spinning. She's alive, and she wants to meet. Maria's expression darkened. Or it's a trap. Midnight at the pier. Lucas drove through the quiet streets, the city lights fading as he neared the industrial docks. The air grew colder, thick with the scent of salt and damp metal. In the back seat, Zoe clutched Mr. Teddy tightly, her wide brown eyes staring out the window. The child's quiet presence was a reminder of what was at stake. Where are we going, Lucas? Zoe asked softly, breaking the silence. To see your mommy, he replied, his voice steady despite the storm brewing in his mind. Zoe brightened at his words, her small hands gripping her bear tighter. Is she okay? Lucas glanced at her in the rearview mirror. We'll find out soon, sweetheart. The meeting place, Pier 17, was desolate, its rows of rusted shipping containers casting long shadows under the faint glow of a single overhead light. The rhythmic sound of waves lapping against the dock filled the air, broken only by the occasional groan of metal as the wind shifted. Lucas parked the car a safe distance away, stepping out cautiously. He scanned the area, his hand instinctively hovering near his sidearm. Zoe hesitated, but Lucas turned to her with a reassuring smile. Stay close to me, okay? She nodded, clutching his hand as they walked toward the dimly lit pier. Every step heightened Lucas's awareness of his surroundings. If this was a trap, he needed to be ready. Lucas, a voice called from the shadows. It was soft, trembling, but unmistakably Kara's. He turned, his eyes locking onto a figure emerging from behind a stack of shipping crates. Kara looked thinner than the photos he'd seen. Her cheeks hollow, her eyes sunken with exhaustion. Her dark hair was disheveled, and her clothes hung loosely on her frame, but her expression softened when she saw Zoe. Mommy. Zoe cried, breaking free from Lucas's grip and running toward her. Kara dropped to her knees, opening her arms to catch Zoe. The little girl clung to her mother, burying her face in Kara's shoulder. Kara hugged her tightly, tears streaming down her face. I missed you so much, baby, Kara whispered, her voice breaking. I'm so sorry. Lucas stood back, giving them a moment, though his senses remained on high alert. His gaze darted around the area, searching for any sign of danger. Kara, we need to talk, he said finally, his tone firm but gentle. She looked up at him, her eyes wary. I don't have much time. Then start from the beginning. Lucas urged. Why are you running? Who's after you? Kara hesitated, her grip on Zoe tightening. She kissed her daughter's forehead and whispered something Lucas couldn't hear before setting her down gently. "Go stand by Mr. Lucas for a minute, sweetheart. Mommy needs to talk to him." Zoe obeyed, reluctantly taking Lucas's hand. Kara straightened, wrapping her arms around herself as if bracing for a storm. "It's my brother, Michael." Lucas nodded, already expecting her answer. "What does he want?" Kara's lips trembled. "Control. He's always wanted control. Over me, over my life. I made the mistake of asking him for help years ago, when I was desperate, and he's never let me forget it. But this time, it's worse." "How so?" Lucas pressed. Kara glanced around nervously, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I found something. Documents, accounts. He's laundering money, using shell companies and charities as fronts. I didn't mean to get involved, but I saw enough to know he's in deep. He realized I knew, and suddenly he was everywhere, threatening to take Zoe if I didn't keep quiet." Lucas's mind raced. "The cash in the storage unit, is it his?" Kara nodded. "It's some of what I took before I ran. I thought it would be enough to disappear, but he found this." "And the journal, the notes you left?" Lucas asked. Kara's expression hardened. "I wanted Zoe to know the truth if something happened to me. I didn't want her to think I left her because I didn't love her." Lucas took a step closer. "Kara, you don't have to run anymore. We've got evidence against Michael. Financial records tying him to fraud. Testimonies from people he's hurt. If you're willing to testify, we can take him down." Kara shook her head, panic flashing in her eyes. "You don't understand. He has people, connections. He'll find me. He'll find Zoe. He won't stop." Before Lucas could respond, the faint sound of an approaching car broke through the stillness. Kara froze, her eyes widening in fear. "He's here," she whispered. Lucas pulled Zoe behind him, his hand resting on his gun. "Stay with your mom," he instructed Kara. "I'll handle this." A sleek black car pulled into view, its headlights cutting through the darkness. The driver stepped out, a man in a tailored suit with sharp features and a cold smile. "Michael Evans." Well, Michael drawled, his voice dripping with condescension. "Isn't this a touching family reunion?" Lucas stepped forward, blocking Michael's path. "That's far enough." Michael smirked, his hands raised in mock surrender. "Relax, Officer Hayes. I'm just here to collect what's mine. Your niece isn't property," Lucas snapped, "and she's not going anywhere with you." Michael's eyes narrowed, his smug demeanor slipping. "You don't understand, officer. Kara's unfit to care for Zoe. She's unstable, reckless. I'm the only one who can give her a proper life." Lucas took another step forward, his voice low and dangerous. "What Zoe needs is to be safe, and that's not going to happen with you." Michael's jaw tightened, but he quickly composed himself, glancing past Lucas at Kara. "You think you can hide forever? You think this cop can protect you? You have no idea who you're dealing with." "Neither do you," Lucas shot back, his hand gripping his gun. "You're under investigation, Evans. Fraud, money laundering, coercion. You've left a trail, and we're following it straight to you." Michael's smile faltered, but before he could respond, the sound of approaching sirens filled the air. Lucas allowed himself a small smile as backup arrived, red and blue lights flashing. "Looks like your time's up," Lucas said. Michael turned to leave, but officers intercepted him, placing him under arrest. Lucas watched as they cuffed him and led him to a squad car, satisfaction burning in his chest. Kara approached hesitantly, Zoe clutching her hand. "Is it over?" she asked, her voice trembling. Lucas turned to her, his expression softening. "It's not over yet, but he's not going to hurt you or Zoe anymore. You're safe now." Tears welled in Kara's eyes as she pulled Zoe close, her voice choked with emotion. "Thank you, Lucas, for everything." As the sirens faded and the night grew quiet once more, Lucas stood with them, silently vowing to see this fight through to the end. For Kara. For Zoe. For the family they deserved to be. Lucas felt the weight of the moment settle heavily on his shoulders. The arrest of Michael Evans might have bought them some time, but it wasn't the end of the battle. As the backup cars pulled away, Lucas stayed near Kara and Zoe, his hand resting protectively on the holster at his side. Kara hugged Zoe tightly, the little girl clinging to her as though afraid she might disappear again. "Mommy, are you coming home now?" Zoe asked, her voice small and full of hope. Kara's face crumpled, and she nodded. "Yes, baby. I promise I won't leave you again." Lucas stepped closer, his voice firm but kind. "Kara, we need to talk about next steps. Michael might be in custody, but his connections won't disappear overnight. We have to make sure you and Zoe are truly safe." Kara nodded, her eyes darting nervously around the dimly lit pier. "What do we do? I can't keep running forever." "You don't have to," Lucas reassured her. "We'll start by getting you into protective custody. The DA's office can help with relocation if it comes to that. But first, we need you to testify." Kara hesitated, the weight of the decision evident in her expression. "Testify? Against Michael? Lucas, you don't know what he's capable of. Even behind bars, he'll find a way to hurt us. That's why we're going to build the strongest case we can," Lucas said. "We already have financial evidence and testimonies from others he's manipulated, but your story will make it undeniable. If we take him down, he won't be able to touch you or Zoe again." Tears welled in Kara's eyes, and she looked down at her daughter, who was now quietly humming to herself, her hand clutching Mr. Teddy. "I'll do it," Kara said finally, her voice trembling but resolute. "For Zoe." Lucas nodded, admiration flashing in his eyes. "We'll make sure you're protected every step of the way." The drive back to the station was quiet. Zoe had fallen asleep in the back seat, her head resting against Kara's arm. Kara stared out the window, her expression a mixture of relief and exhaustion. Lucas kept his focus on the road, but his mind raced with plans, contacting the DA, arranging protective measures, and preparing for the fallout of Michael's arrest. When they arrived at the station, Maria was waiting for them. She took one look at Kara and Zoe and immediately offered a warm smile. "Good to see you both safe," she said, motioning for them to follow her inside. Kara glanced around nervously as they entered the station, her grip on Zoe tightening. "How long will we need to stay here?" "Just for tonight," Maria reassured her. "We've arranged for a safe house starting tomorrow. Tonight, we'll keep you both here under watch." Lucas guided them to a quiet room where Zoe could sleep. As Kara settled her daughter on a small cot, Lucas stepped outside to speak with Maria. "She's agreed to testify," he said quietly, "but she's terrified. Michael's reach is long, and she knows it." Maria nodded, her expression serious. "I've been digging into his network. He's not just laundering money. He's tied to organized crime. If this goes to court, we'll need federal involvement." "I'll contact the FBI tomorrow," Lucas said, "but for now, we focus on keeping them safe." Maria glanced back at the room where Kara sat beside Zoe, brushing her daughter's hair gently. "She's stronger than she thinks," Maria said softly, "but she's going to need all the help she can get." Later that night, Lucas sat in the station's break room, nursing a cup of lukewarm coffee. The adrenaline from the night's events had worn off, leaving him drained but restless. His mind replayed the confrontation at the pier, the fear in Kara's eyes, and the innocence in Zoe's. Maria entered, holding a file in her hand. "Thought you'd want to see this," she said, sliding it across the table. Lucas opened it, his eyes scanning the pages. It was a detailed report on Michael Evans, his financial ties, his shell companies, and the extensive list of people he'd manipulated or destroyed. But what caught Lucas's attention was a note at the bottom of the file. "Michael's connections to a syndicate in Chicago," Lucas read aloud. "This is bigger than we thought." Maria nodded. "He's not just a con artist. He's a cog in a much larger machine. Taking him down could unravel a lot of powerful people." Lucas leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. which means they'll fight harder to protect him. Maria's gaze hardened. And we'll fight harder to protect Kara and Zoe. In the early hours of the morning, Lucas checked on Kara and Zoe one last time. Zoe was sound asleep, her teddy bear tucked under her arm. Kara sat awake, her eyes fixed on her daughter's peaceful face. "She's all I have," Kara whispered, not looking up as Lucas approached. "Everything I've done, every choice I've made, it's all been for her. And now it's time for us to help," Lucas said gently. "You don't have to fight alone anymore." Kara finally looked at him, her eyes filled with gratitude and fear. "Do you really think we can win?" Lucas crouched beside her, his voice firm. "We don't just fight for what's easy, Kara. We fight for what's right. And I promise you, we're not going to stop until you and Zoe are safe." For the first time in days, Kara allowed herself a small, hopeful smile. "Thank you," she said softly. As Lucas left the room, he felt the weight of their trust settle on his shoulders. The road ahead would be long and dangerous, but he was determined to see it through. For Kara, for Zoe, for justice. Justice in the balance. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation as the trial of Michael Evans began. Journalists filled the gallery, their pens poised to document the downfall of a man once considered untouchable. Kara sat at the defense table beside the district attorney, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She looked fragile but determined, her eyes darting occasionally toward Zoe, who was seated quietly with Officer Maria in the back of the courtroom. Lucas stood near the doors, his uniform crisp, his gaze steady. He had become both protector and witness, a steadfast presence in Kara and Zoe's fight for freedom. The air was thick with tension as the judge entered, calling the court to order. The prosecution began with a detailed recounting of Michael's crimes: fraud, money laundering, coercion, each charge backed by evidence Lucas and Maria had worked tirelessly to gather. Bank records, testimony from former victims, and even the flagged bills found in Kara's storage unit painted a damning picture. But Michael Evans was nothing if not cunning. His defense lawyer, a sharp-tongued woman in a designer suit, launched an aggressive attack, attempting to discredit Kara's character. "Miss Thompson," the lawyer began, pacing in front of the jury, "you claim you fled for your life, yet you left your daughter in a grocery store parking lot. What kind of mother does that?" Kara's face paled, but she straightened her back, gripping the edges of the witness stand. "I didn't leave Zoe because I wanted to," she said, her voice trembling but clear. "I left her because I knew Michael would find us. I was trying to protect her." The lawyer smirked, turning to the jury. "Protect her? By abandoning her to strangers?" Lucas clenched his fists, his jaw tightening as he fought the urge to interrupt. Kara took a deep breath, her eyes flickering toward Zoe before returning to the lawyer. "I left her because I knew someone would find her, someone who would keep her safe while I found a way to stop Michael," Kara said, her voice gaining strength. "I couldn't risk him using her to control me." The lawyer pressed on, but Kara held her ground, her determination unwavering. Lucas felt a swell of pride. She was stronger than even she realized. When it was Lucas's turn to testify, he approached the stand with calm confidence. The DA began with direct questions about the investigation, leading Lucas to recount the night he found Zoe, the evidence discovered in the storage unit, and his encounters with Michael Evans. "What was your impression of Miss Thompson's actions?" the DA asked. Lucas looked directly at the jury. "In my 10 years on the force, I've seen parents who neglect their children, who abandon them without a second thought. Kara Thompson is not one of those parents. Every decision she made, every risk she took was for her daughter. She didn't abandon Zoe. She trusted the system to protect her." The defense lawyer attempted to rattle Lucas during cross-examination, questioning his judgment and insinuating bias. But Lucas remained composed, dismantling each accusation with calm precision. "Officer Hayes," the lawyer said, her tone sharp, "would you say you've become personally invested in this case?" Lucas met her gaze, unflinching. "I'd say I've become personally invested in justice, And justice isn't served by letting men like Michael Evans manipulate and terrorize their own family. The courtroom murmured, and the lawyer quickly moved on, unable to shake Lucas's resolve. As the trial stretched into its third day, Zoe's presence became a quiet source of strength for Kara. The little girl spent her time drawing in the back of the courtroom, oblivious to the weight of the proceedings but offering a reminder of what they were fighting for. During a recess, Lucas found Zoe sitting cross-legged on a bench, showing Maria her latest drawing. It was another crayon masterpiece, a courtroom scene with Lucas, Kara, and Zoe holding hands under a bright yellow sun. "Lucas," Zoe said, holding up the drawing, "this is us when we win." Lucas knelt beside her, his throat tightening at her unwavering faith. "It's beautiful, Zoe. And you know what? I think you're right. We're going to win." The turning point came when James Foster, one of Michael's former business partners, took the stand. His testimony revealed a pattern of manipulation and financial abuse, corroborating Kara's claims and exposing Michael's ruthless tactics. Combined with the physical evidence and Kara's testimony, it created a case too strong to ignore. When the jury returned with their verdict, the courtroom fell silent. Lucas stood near Kara, his presence steady as she held Zoe's hand. "On the charges of fraud, money laundering, and coercion, we find the defendant, Michael Evans, guilty." Kara let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Tears filled her eyes as she hugged Zoe tightly, the little girl giggling in confusion, but happy to see her mother smile. Lucas watched the scene, a deep sense of relief washing over him. Justice had been served, but more importantly, Kara and Zoe were free. In the weeks that followed, Kara and Zoe moved into a new home, their location kept confidential for their safety. Lucas and Maria continued to check in, helping Kara navigate the challenges of starting over. With Michael in prison and his assets seized, Kara finally had the chance to rebuild her life. One sunny afternoon, Lucas stopped by their new home. Zoe greeted him at the door, her face lighting up as she pulled him inside. "Lucas, look," she exclaimed, pointing to a wall covered in her drawings. "Mommy says I can have an art studio when I grow up." Kara appeared, a warm smile on her face. "She's been busy," she said, "and I've been looking into art programs for her. It feels good to plan for the future." Lucas nodded, his chest swelling with pride. "You've both come a long way." Kara stepped closer, her expression softening. "We couldn't have done it without you. You gave us more than protection. Lucas, you gave us hope." Lucas smiled, looking down at Zoe, who had begun tugging at his sleeve, eager to show him her latest masterpiece. "You two gave me just as much. Never doubt that." As Zoe led him to her drawing table, her laughter filling the room, Lucas felt something he hadn't felt in years, a profound sense of purpose. He had found not just justice, but a new kind of family, one built on trust, resilience, and the unbreakable bond between a mother and her daughter. Several months passed, and life for Kara and Zoe began to find a new rhythm. The dark shadow of Michael Evans had been replaced with a cautious optimism, though the scars of their ordeal lingered. Kara had started a new job at a community center, working with families in crisis, a role she felt deeply connected to after her own experiences. Zoe, meanwhile, had become the star of her kindergarten class, her bright personality and endless drawings captivating her teachers and classmates. Lucas remained a regular presence in their lives, though he was careful not to overstep. His visits were always welcomed with open arms, especially by Zoe, who had taken to calling him Uncle Lucas. For Lucas, seeing them rebuild their lives was the closure he hadn't realized he needed. A final threat. One evening, as Lucas drove to visit Kara and Zoe, his phone buzzed. It was Maria. "Lucas, we have a situation," she said, her voice urgent. "Michael's connections on the outside are trying to intimidate Kara. She received an anonymous note this afternoon. No signature, but it was clear. Stay quiet, or you'll regret it." Lucas gripped the steering wheel tighter, anger surging through him. "Do we know who sent it?" "Not yet," Maria replied. But the DA is taking it seriously. They're increasing surveillance around Kara's house. I'm almost there, Lucas said. I'll make sure they're okay. When he arrived, the house was quiet. Kara opened the door cautiously, relief flooding her face when she saw him. Lucas, she said, stepping aside to let him in. I didn't know who else to call. Zoe's in her room, but I don't want her to know what's going on. Lucas nodded, scanning the room with a practiced eye. You're doing the right thing by being careful. Where's the note? Kara handed him the envelope, her hands trembling slightly. Lucas read the message, his jaw tightening. It was simple but chilling. This isn't over. He turned to Kara, his voice calm but firm. This is meant to scare you, but you're not alone in this. We'll find out who's behind it. Kara nodded, her fear giving way to determination. I'm not running again, Lucas. I won't let them take our peace. The final confrontation. That night, Lucas stayed with Kara and Zoe, keeping watch as they slept. Around midnight, a suspicious car slowed outside the house. Lucas stepped onto the porch, his hand on his holstered gun. The car idled for a moment before speeding away, but Lucas had already noted the license plate. The next morning, Maria called with good news. The car's registered to one of Michael's former associates, a low-level enforcer with a rap sheet. He's been trying to intimidate Kara on Michael's orders. That's all I needed to hear, Lucas said, determination flaring in his voice. By the end of the day, Lucas and Maria had tracked the man down. Under pressure, he folded, admitting that Michael had coordinated the harassment through coded messages sent from prison. Armed with this information, the DA moved swiftly, cutting off Michael's communication privileges and extending his sentence for conspiracy and harassment. When Lucas informed Kara of the development, she let out a shaky breath. Does this mean it's really over? Lucas placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Yes. He won't be able to reach you again. You're safe now. Kara's eyes welled with tears, and she hugged him tightly. Thank you, Lucas, for everything. A new beginning. Months later, on a bright spring day, Lucas arrived at Kara and Zoe's house for a small celebration. Kara had officially adopted the community center as her second home, where she now helped other mothers rebuild their lives. Zoe, meanwhile, had won a local art contest, her crayon drawings displayed proudly at a neighborhood gallery. Uncle Lucas. Zoe called as she ran to greet him, her face lit up with excitement. She grabbed his hand and pulled him toward the backyard, where Kara had set up a picnic. As they sat together under the blooming cherry blossoms, laughter filled the air. Kara poured glasses of lemonade, her smile radiant, as she watched Zoe show Lucas her latest drawings. You've become family, you know, Kara said softly, sitting beside Lucas. We couldn't have done this without you. Lucas looked at her, his heart full. You two are stronger than you realize. I just gave a little push. Kara smiled, her gratitude shining through. You gave us more than that. You gave us hope. Zoe ran up to them, holding out a new drawing. It showed Lucas, Kara, and Zoe standing together under a bright sun, surrounded by blooming flowers. This is us forever, Zoe declared proudly. Lucas knelt to her level, taking the drawing with a smile. Forever sounds good to me. As the sun set and the world around them grew quiet, Lucas felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. Kara and Zoe were safe, their future bright. And for Lucas, knowing he had been part of their journey was all the closure he needed.